Financial maths, one of the most practical sections that we get to cover. Okay, we have up until now learned two formulae. The one links to simple interest. So in other words, interest is earned on the amount of money that you put in the bank on day one. And the other one here is compound interest. Interest is earned on the money that you invested, as well as the interest that you continue to earn. Okay, important that you know what each of these letters represents. So A is the final amount. This is also known as either the accrued amount, which is a very fancy word, or the accumulated amount. Okay, so lots of different ways to define that A value there. P, most commonly just referred to as the present value, so the amount you invest initially. N is the number of time periods. And I is the interest rate as a percentage. Okay, this should be common knowledge to you. I reckon we dive straight into some examples and make sure that the foundations are in place. Here we go. Calculate. You invest 3,600 Rand into a savings account that earns 5.65% simple interest per annum. That means yearly. How much will you receive if you withdraw the money after 30 months? Okay, let's pop our formula down. So we know that A, this is a simple interest question, is equal to P1 plus I times N, or N times I. It's really up to you. Okay, A is what they want. At the end of the day, how much will I receive? Okay, P is the present value when I invested it. So that's going to be the 3,600 Rand. So 3,600. 1 plus I here is the interest rate as a percentage. So I can either type in here 5.65%, or what I like to do, because it involves very little thinking, is just taking 5.65 and putting it over 100, because that's what percent means, per 100, per century. Okay, and then, this is simple interest, so we need to multiply by N, the number of years. Okay, because this is an annual thing, per annum, and they are asking me here 30 months. So that's a bit of a sneaky question. Okay, so we can either do some logical deduction, and we can say, well, there are 12 months in a year, so I'm going to say 12, 24, that leaves me with 6 months, and so we can figure out that it's 2.5 years. Or what we could do is say, well, I'm going to take the 30 months and say, if I put it over 12, that will give me an annual answer. Okay, and then we can just type this all into our calculators, and that gives us an answer there of 4,108,5. Okay, now maths teachers are not going to be happy with that answer, because comma 5 does not apply to financial maths. Remember, financial maths is rands and cents, and so we need to then say and 50 cents. Okay, if you just say comma 5, then you might walk into a shop and walk away with 5 cents instead of 50 cents, and every cent counts. So please make sure that when you get your final answer here, that you add that second decimal place as a 0 if it's not included. Okay, second question here. How much money would you need to invest in an account that earns 7.2% compound interest per annum in order to have saved 100,000 Rand after 20 years? Okay, so it's the compound interest formula now that I need. So A is equal to P1 plus I to the power of N. Okay, how much money would you need to invest? Okay, the amount you invest is actually this value here. So this is a little bit different. We're going to have to manipulate our equation when we start solving. Okay, it's in an account that earns 7.2% compound interest per annum. Okay, so P we don't know. 7.2 per 100%. Okay, we've got a 20-year investment here, and we want to have 100,000 Rand. Okay, so in order to solve for that unknown p-value there, I think what we need to do is it's multiplying by this whole bracket, so we need to divide by this whole bracket. So there we go. What I do to the one side, I do to the other side. So 1 plus 7,2 over 100 to the power of 20. And then those are going to cancel out, which means I'm just going to have p on the one side, and the rest I can type into my calculator. Okay, and you'll start to notice that I do as few calculations as possible in between, because we don't want to round off unnecessarily. So you want to try and keep it like this and then just calculate it all in one go. In grade 11 maths, we are going to get to sections where they get quite lengthy, and then we might break it up, but then we'll need to keep all our decimal places. So just, as far as possible, keep as much of the working out to do in one step, so you don't make any silly rounding errors. Okay, once we type that into the calculator, we get an answer here of 24,894 Rand and 55 cents. So in other words, if you invest this much money at a rate of 7.2% for 20 years, you can then end up with a large sum of money many, many, many years later. Here's a third example. What annual compound interest rate would you need in order for your money to double after 8 years? Okay, this question, they like to ask it, and it feels like we don't have enough information. Okay, the question is, what is the interest rate? Okay, and we at least know that we're dealing with compound interest here. But all that we know other than that is 8 years, and we want our money to double. So as always, I suggest we start by writing down the formula. A is equal to P 1 plus I to the power of n, because we're dealing with compound interest. And now we want to substitute in some things. Okay, we know it's 8 years, so that's going to be an 8. And we know it's compound interest. And other than that, we are going to need to do a bit of work here. Okay, 1 plus I is the thing we're working out. And now for A and P, we need to put something in there. Now, what is lucky is that you could pretty much put anything in there. But I'm going to be very mathematical and say, well, if I invested X Rand, and then that doubles, it will amount to 2X at the end of the day. Okay? And now we can just solve. Okay? So we can say, well, let's divide this side by X, and what I do to the one side, I do to the other side, so that I leave my bracket alone. Okay? Now what we're actually sitting with here is 2X divided by 1X, and those x's will cancel away anyway. So we end up with 2 is equal to this bracket, 1 plus I to the power of 8. And now to get rid of that power of 8, we do the root of 8. And what I do to one side, I do to the other side. So now I've got 1 plus I is equal to the 8th root of 2. Let's move this minus 1. So it's going to be minus 1 over there. And so I is equal to the 8th root of 2 minus 1. Now I'm ready to calculate that. So the 8th root, make sure you know how to do that on your calculator. Shift and then the X to the block button. So the 8th root of 2 minus 1 gives us this answer here, 0,0905 ... Okay, so they've specifically asked for interest rate, and I've worked out I. So to get that to be a rate, remember I said it's always as a percentage, we can just times our answer by 100. So therefore the interest rate is equal to, keep this answer on your calculator, multiply it by 100, and we get 9,05%. But money doesn't always get invested. It doesn't always grow. Sometimes we buy things and they lose value over time, and that's known as depreciation. So I'm going to buy an asset, a car, a printer, a cell phone, whatever it is, and over time it's going to lose value. Okay? Then there are two other terms that we need to know. So the book value is the value of an asset at any given time. And then you get to a point where an item is no longer useful, And so that would then be known as the scrap value. So there we have some new terminology: depreciation, book value, and scrap value. We also get two new formulae introduced to us. So we have now the same, they look the same, but they have minuses included in them. So we get two types of depreciation: straight line depreciation and reducing balance depreciation. Okay, and so applying these is very similar to what we've been doing. Let's try another example or two just to check that we know how to read the questions carefully. A coffee machine costs 8,999 Rand. Calculate how much it will be worth in 5 years' time if it depreciates, number 1, on a reducing balance at 8% per annum, and number 2, on a straight line basis at 9% per annum. Okay, reducing balance, that's the formula that looks like compound interest. So that's the formula I'm going to jot down here. A equals P 1 minus I to the power of N, whereas the straight line is the one that looks like simple interest, 1 minus I times N. Okay, and if you've got that, you can pretty much substitute in. Just remember that in a reducing or in a depreciation question, your A value needs to be smaller than the present value. At the end of the day, your item is losing value. So we are going to substitute in the place of P, that 8,999 Rand, 1 minus, here's my interest rate, 8% to the power of 5 for 5 years. Okay, let's calculate that. Okay, and then very similar on the straight line basis, we're going to substitute in. Just important to choose the right formula and get that terminology into your brain. So 8% times by the 5 years. And if we type that into the calculator there, 5,399 Rand and 40, don't forget to add the 0, cents. Last one here. A cell phone is currently worth 7,593 Rand and 75 cents. Determine what it was originally worth if it depreciated for 3 years at a rate of 25% per annum on a reducing balance method. Okay, so the first thing I'm looking at is what formula do I need? Okay, it says here reducing balance. So that's going to be the one with the exponent n. So A is equal to P 1 minus I to the power of n. And now I want to try and figure things out. A cell phone is currently worth 7,500 and all those little bits and pieces, 93 Rand and 75 cents. Okay, what was it originally worth? In other words, they are asking me here, what was the P value? Okay, if it depreciated for 3 years, so there's 3 years for the N, at a rate of 25%. So now I know what to fill in where. My 7,000 is what it's worth now, 7,593,75 equals P, we don't know, 1 minus the interest rate there, 25%, to the power of 3. Now, if you remember from earlier, it's best just to divide by this entire bracket, because then we don't risk any funny decimal problems. 1 minus 25 over 100 to the power of 3. Let's type that into the calculator. And there I get a nice round answer when I do that. So P is equal to 18,000 Rand. There we have it. So again, it's all about choosing the right formula, substituting what you have, and then just solving algebraically for the unknown.